This is my new favourite mid-game weapon in patch 15. It's small for fighting in close quarters, it's cheap to mod, it can attach a bipod in certain configurations, and it can two-shot most PMCs at this point in the wipe, all with ammo available on the flea market. Today we're looking at the AK-104, which is not a widely used weapon by any means, but I think this wipe it's ended up in the perfect intersection of performance and cost. Okay, so let's start by taking a look at the basic stats of comparable weapons within 762x39. These numbers are, as usual, the statistics of the gun when it is completely stripped back and has no parts on it whatsoever. As you can see, the AKM series has the lowest ergonomics on them by default, with the highest being on the RD704 and the Mutant. These two guns are pretty good, and they are back on the flea market as well, however a lot more expensive than some of the more basic AK variants, and they're a bit more tricky to mod because some of the AK components are not compatible. Given we're only a couple of weeks into the wipe, I certainly don't want to be spending hundreds of thousands of rubles modifying a weapon, so from the remaining list I do like the AK-103 and the 104 from a bang for buck perspective. Ergo is a lot more important these days ever since the recoil rework, and we get about 10 more for free starting with these guns rather than the AKM series. They are also usually cheaper because people need to use the AKM style weapons to complete Punisher, whereas the 103 and the 104, they don't have any quests associated with them specifically. Now, here's where a little bit of historical inertia comes in with the player base, in that the AK-103 is usually more expensive than the 104. This is because in the past it was typically always seen as the better gun, starting with slightly lower recoil, which mattered a lot more in the past. However, because the AK-104 has 3 more ergonomics and the recoil at the end of the day doesn't really make that much difference anymore, I actually think the 104 is a better choice, especially given it's shorter, which practically has a big impact when playing around corners. You can usually grab one of these for about 30k, they're dirt cheap on the flea market, so let's go and look at a couple of builds. Depending on your trader levels, you're going to want to make this in a few different ways. The basics at level 2 traders would be a DTK muzzle from Skier, adding a saw pistol grip from Mechanic 2, and a butt pad if you have access to it via Gunsmith, although to be honest they are pretty cheap on the flea these days because of flipping. An alternative is replacing the whole stock with a PT1, which is again on level 2 traders, and this itself can take a butt pad as well in theory if you want to add one. For the handguards, I advise getting one of the MOE AKMs. Although you can't buy these at level 2 traders, what I like to do is go and look at all of the different varieties of MOE on the flea market, and typically the FDE, the olive drab or the olive plum will be around the trader price if not a bit lower. Failing that, the CAA RS47 isn't too bad an alternative from Peacekeeper 2. From here, you can use whichever foregrip you like. The RK4 from Skier 2 is probably the best you can buy then, otherwise at Peacekeeper 3 you can go for the RVG Black, which is my favourite all-rounder. We then remove the rear sight, pop a Bastion cover on the back, pick a sight and a tactical device of your choosing. This basic build at level 2 traders costs under 80k, which is really nothing, coming in at 70 ergo and 88 recoil. The level 3 variant, which is greatly improved through the RRD 4C muzzle brake from Mechanic and an M-Lock foregrip, gets us to 80 ergo and 77 recoil, this time still costing less than 100k for the base build. I use these guns for close quarters almost exclusively and use a red dot or a holographic to make sure that I have the advantage. The most notable part of this build is the lack of a suppressor, and the reason for this is that the basic 762x39 suppressors just aren't that good. When you're up close and personal, a suppressor doesn't really help that much, especially when firing on full auto, although it can limit third-party fights if you stick around too long. Learning to play around being unsuppressed though can actually be quite powerful because people think they have a much better read on you. Deliberately being in places that have lots of maneuverability means that you can move after revealing yourself, which lets you pull off fast flanks. Playing quickly can work wonders with this weapon, especially with the ammo, which we'll talk about in a moment. If you do want to be suppressed, I either advise moving over to the 5.56 and 5.45 weapons given the much greater versatility over there these days, or this is where the Mutant and the RD704 comes in, because they can use the 762x51 suppressors instead, but this ends up increasing the cost quite a lot. Before we move on, there are 2 easy ways to get a bipod on this gun if you're looking for one to use it with. The first cheap way is the Trax 1 from Mechanic 2 and the Trax bridge connecting rail that goes underneath. While the 104 can't take the Trax 2 second stage handguards, this rail allows you to add the B10 bipod, which is the one that attaches to many different guns. You can still add a foregrip with this on, so it doesn't cost you much in terms of stats. The other alternative, which is a decent build by itself, is the B30 handguard, which as a gunsmith part has a 3 Rambata, but it's a little pricey. However, it does have good stats and it can use the B33 cover as well, which is itself superior to the Bastion. All of these builds can be replicated across most of the other AKs too, so they'll work across the AKMs or the AKMNs or whichever you want. If you can get the bipod to work, it is extremely powerful in theory because it makes any weapon a total laser beam with minus 80% recoil. However, it's a little fiddly to get into exactly the right position to take the shot. My advice is to try a few places out first that you might want to use it in because it's very location specific as to whether you can get a good angle. Alright, so with the builds out the way, let's have a look at the ammo, which is half of the reason why this gun is so good. All ammo over 42 pen has been banned on the flea this wipe, and a few others are banned under this as well, including the notorious M80 for 7.62x51. What has just sneaked in through the threshold though is 7.62 PP. This is a very solid cartridge, and last wipe it was broadly in the second or third tier of ammo used because it was purchasable on the traders directly. This is despite 7.62x39 getting a quite bad reputation across the top end of the player base. I mean, I got shot at a lot with PP simply due to its availability on Prapor 4, which is still there by the way. However, given that you can buy it on the flea market and we're near the start of the wipe, many players are using class 4 armor, and 41 pen being fired on full auto is extremely strong against this. It doesn't matter whether you're wearing a 6B33 plate with class 2 soft underneath or a monoclete plate with class 2 aramid, the pen of the PP round will go straight through and kill PMCs 4 times out of 5 in 2 shots to the thorax. If you try to go for other similar bullets in other calibers, you get a little bit stuck because M80 is not available on the flea anymore, and the best that you can get is BCP FMJ, but this won't 2-shot a class 4 armor with class 2 behind. In 54R, clearly LPS and T46 are very powerful, but taking into account the guns that they actually go into, I think that 7.62x39 is way more accessible and easier to shoot in the early wipe. PP is pretty expensive, hovering between 900 and 1000 rubles a round, but given how good it is, I certainly think it's worth top loading over PS. This is another benefit of 7.62x39 at this point. 7.62 PS is still pretty good with 35 pen, and the performance is not far off BCP FMJ by itself. What's interesting is if you take an AK-104 modded with tier 3 traders like we looked at and compare it to an RD-704, even combined with a BMD which is from level 4 traders, the performance difference between the two is hardly noticeable. So next up, let's take a look at a few raids with the 104 in action. If you enjoyed the music in today's video, please also consider supporting the channel by going and listening to those albums over on Spotify in the description. Is that below? Well, let's go fight him. Holy pre-fire! Lucky last bullet. Never fails. Door's open already. Did I just hear a sound in the garage? I think so. Whoa! Dude, I reacted before I even, like, meant to. I reacted before I even realized that I'd shot him. Got a mounted gun kill yet this wipe? I don't think I've ever killed anybody with a mounted gun, if I'm honest. I never go on them. Got to use that desync / peeker's advantage in the perfect moment. Peek out just when there's nowhere they can go. There's someone over here. What's the best way to do this? Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Oh, we got him. Nice job, team. I want that. Did I finish? Was that a step? My friends? Was that me, or was that someone else? Guess we could just scarp her. The exit is just over here. I do really want to keep that COFDM radio. Did sound like wood, didn't it? It sounded like a single step on wood. Let me over, you... It's fine. Don't worry, it's fine. It's all okay. I genuinely thought vaulting would become better when the system was in place, but it's just as bad as it always was. So now I have two systems to concern myself about. Now I have to wonder whether the jump's going to work or whether the vault's going to work. It's like it's almost worse. It's almost worse. Cool. Yeah, done with Punisher with the triple kill at the end. As usual, a big shout out to all my patrons, and as always, have fun in your raids.